Hi guys, Brian here from the Sydney Back Pain Program. So a successful back pain program or management program is going to have kind of two main aspects to it. So the first aspect, which is probably the most obvious to you, is going to be building a strong and stable back, so it's robust enough to survive day-to-day lifting and moving and sort of demands. But I'd argue the most important part, which is probably also the hardest thing to do, not only initially but also going forward for the rest of your life, is what we call sort of managing your back pain aggravators. So your back pain aggravators are movements or posture habits that predispose you to disc injuries or back pain, and they kind of aggravate the back injury. So when you've got that injury, especially if you're sort of person that goes through cycles, or it's it comes good but then it gets bad again, then it comes good and goes good again, you've definitely got pain aggravators going on that you don't realise that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that are keeping that injury fresh. Because a disc injury, a bulge or a herniation, provided you take out the aggravating movements over time, that bulge or herniation will actually eventually gristle and your body will start to nibble away at it. But that only happens provided you take out the aggravating movements and habits that created it in the first place. So what I'll do today, with the help of a balloon, is just give you a very sort of crude basic understanding as to how discs get injured, and maybe give you a couple of ideas as how you can start to begin to take out some of those bad movement habits and give the back a chance to settle, so it kind of gets you out of that sharp sort of stage when it's all just trying to fire up and go and just kind of explode in pain. So the most common type of disc injury or herniation is where it comes out backwards towards your actual spinal nerve. So in extreme cases, this is where people get what you call ecstatic pain, and that's where the bulge in your disc is starting to pinch on your nerve, and it's either giving you pain down one leg, or maybe in really extreme cases you start to get numbness in your toes or your foot, or you start to kind of lose power in that leg, like it just doesn't want to do its thing. So the most common cause of that basically is what we call flexion, or rounding your back. So you bend forwards and your whole back kind of rounds to kind of compensate. The reason it's the most common is because a lot of people these days unfortunately have a job where they sit down for maybe 10 or 12 hours a day, and it kind of predisposes you to that, because A, it makes your hips tight, and B, it's kind of putting your discs in a weakened position for it to start to cause a problem long term. So if you want to imagine that if you sit down in an office chair and you've got no lumbar support and you're all kind of rounded out like this on your computer, if we took your discs out and we had a look at one of them using this balloon, so when you imagine this is your disc, my hand above and below is going to be your vertebrae, the bony bits above and below. Imagine if we're sat, you're sat here, bent forward, so the weight of your body is going forward. That's going to put a compressive force on the front end of the disc here. And you can see as I push down to the front, it starts to push the rest of the disc and what's inside the disc outwards towards your spinal nerve. It's going to start to cause a problem. So you can imagine over years and years of doing that, if you keep compressing that disc, it's going to start to change its shape as you force the nucleus and the fluid inside towards the rear of the disc. That's how you actually end up getting the bulge, is that you keep forcing what's inside the disc out towards the back, and it literally worms its way through the different layers of the disc, and so eventually hits the outside layer and it starts to create like an aggravated bulge that gets inflamed. And our herniation is the next stage on from that, where that keeps happening until eventually the outer layer kind of gives up, and then the actual fluid inside the disc, the nucleus, starts to leak out, and that's how you get discs that start to lose their height and start to become dehydrated or degenerated, as some people will call it. So what we need to do is find ways that we can spare the back, so we're not constantly compressing it this way, so it can start to let itself set where it needs to. So obviously sitting is the most common, so you always want to make sure that if you have got an office-based job and you need to sit for long periods, always make sure you've got some adequate lumbar support, which could be as easy as getting a towel, rolling it up into like a sort of sausage shape and just putting it in the back here so that you can lean your back against it, and it gives you some support. And the key with sitting down is be able to hold that, healthy spine posture without having to, physically hold it yourself, because eventually you'll just get tired and just slouch anyway. So the key is to set the chair up in a way that it holds you like it, and you don't have to think about it, so you can sit for hours on end, and you're not going to keep compressing these discs. The other one is how you bend to pick things up is probably the next most common. So that's not just stuff from the floor, but also just things off the desk. If you've got bad habits where you tend to, kind of round from your back, you can imagine that's going to create that compressive force again. So you need to start thinking of strategies where you use your hips a bit more, and you can kind of push your butt back, keep your back nice and straight, keep it out of pressure, and keep all that weight in your hips. And if you're not flexible enough to do that to go down to the floor, you might need to do what we call like a lunging strategy, where you put your leg out, come down, let your legs take the weight. Again, keep the back as straight as you can, and then from there you can pick up what you need and spare the back. And that's really important long-term to start getting into those habits, but it's extremely important in the first initial stages where you've got real sharp, debilitating back pain where it's all real fresh. If you keep from bending your back and you give it a chance to settle, like I said, that bulge will start to settle down, and that's when you start to get more capacity, you do more stuff for your back, and it becomes easier to do rehab exercises and just day-to-day kind of walking and doing things again. But you must take out all of those movements and habits which are compressing those discs, give that injury a chance to heal and settle down, and then you're going to be on the right path, and also you're going to be better equipped for the rest of your life, better manage your back pain and not have constant flare-ups.